All right, well, welcome everyone to Moments in Time and UpSpring Reading. I'm really thankful to be here with all of you tonight. And I'm excited to share this virtual space with all of you and all of us to hear these phenomenal pieces of writing that everyone has created. As I was just saying, I had a great time guest editing this issue, and I'm so excited for how it turned out. And I wanted to just say a tiny bit about the theme of UpSpring, I think, because I think when we were choosing a theme, we wanted it to be something that would be positive or with the potential for brightness in, let's face it, a time that's been pretty dark in a lot of different ways, but also something that was open to lots of different interpretations. And I think you all have really succeeded in that, because when I was reading through pieces and choosing things for this issue, it was thrilling to me, is maybe the word, to see how many different ways people took that one word, that single word UpSpring, and had so many different points of view about it and so many different ways to consider it and so many different interpretations. And we're getting to hear a few of those tonight. And so real quickly, I want to tell you how, for the audience members, to tell you how it's going to work. In a few minutes, the first reader will start, and then I'm not going to interrupt again until we go to the sort of question and answer session at the end. Each reader will introduce themselves, they'll say something about their piece, and they'll read their piece, not necessarily in that order, it's however they want to do it. And then we'll just go straight through. When we should have plenty of time at the end for congratulations or questions or anything that you want to say to each other. In the meantime, feel free to use the reaction emojis, the clapping or the thumbs up, or any other sort of positive comments that you want to make in the chat while people are reading or in between readings. That would be great as well. Please keep yourself on mute, obviously, until or unless you're reading. And I think that's it. I think it's pretty much a standard sort of reading. We do have a lot of people, so they're going to be quick. Each person is just going to read their piece or part of their piece from the UpSpring issue. And I did want to take a minute before we get started just to for us to appreciate this wonderful piece of cover art for this issue. Unfortunately, April Graff, the artist, couldn't be with us tonight to talk about the piece, but I did want to make sure that we took a moment to be in awe together of the sort of beauty of this piece, and how, again, what an interesting and gorgeous interpretation of the UpSpring theme. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Our first reader is going to be Smith-Blum, and I will let her take it from there. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Rebecca and Annie, for your help in setting this up. I'm thrilled to be a part of this tonight. This piece, very short piece, was developed during my search for property on the Washington coast, a search that conjured a bit more reflection than it did purchase. And the piece's title is On Edge. A fallen fir blocks the path, branches break under my step and twigs snap at the slightest grasp. Glad for my gardening gloves, grabbed last minute before leaving Seattle. I balance Jane-like on two boughs, felled by coastal winds. A bully stream splits the land to the north. Old growth and errant vines secure the steep banks, covering any sign of the violence that erupted to create the water's pathway to the sea. Then again, a chasm can grow over a longer period, fracturing the ground that held people holding hands, making vows. Puddles burrow after a storm. An underground spring pushes its way up, wanting out, dividing what used to be one into two sides. The forest bed where I stand overflows with storm debris. Rotting tree trunks hollowed out at their base offer full shelter, full circle shelter, like the round crib we had when the boys were infants, snugged against the curve, teddies tugged tight. I wonder out loud about bears in the area, and the real estate agent confirms sightings. His answer puts me on edge. I giant step from the branches to a moss-laden log. The muck just beyond warns. The bluff's edge camouflaged by matted blades of tall grass that succumbed to last night's downpour. Not unlike a day in a family business. Caprice is flattened in service to the grind of commerce. Words left unsaid over 4 decades. An overstep would spell disaster. The agent keeps resetting his mapping device, but no matter how many steps we attempt towards the center of the plot, we can't find it. Tall firs mixed with even taller pines. Older trees have lost most of their lower limbs to storm, allowing the younger ones to compete for the light. The boys took all the light for so long. Our focus was on their growth, their needs, their paths. I slap at a bug piercing my calf, then close my eyes to the sting of it. Words can have that same bite. The agent stumbles, juggling his device in one hand, missing a catchhold with the other. He slips below my sight line. He is not young. I worry he might have broken something as I ask if he is okay. He points to the west, wanting me to look. A forest-filtered swath of sea beckons beyond the creek bed. White froth cascades, pulling promise closer and pushing regrets out. The past, held together by ceaseless demands of growing boys and businesses, lost its footing once the motion ceased. I search between the trees for the bit of land that's supposedly level enough on which to build. Sun rays spotlight a bed of clover, only big enough for a deer to lay with a fawn. The larger site, the structure-worthy flat plain promised by the seller, proves elusive. My exasperated exhale jolts a cottontail who bolts in a gallop, a familiar expenditure of energy, pedal to the metal to make the soccer playoff, scurrying the last block home from the bus stop to make dinner, rushing up the stairs to a baby's cry. Urgent tasks that override the real work of a partnership. The rabbit leaps onto a log, flicks its tail, and looks straight at me. I cross the yards between us and discover the large clearing, hidden only by my tendency to look beyond, rather than focusing on what's right in front of me. A new foundation will be required, one that rests on individual needs rather than the whole, one that has space for new dreams. The sun casts its sinking spell. The breach shrinks in its glow. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, and I'm gonna go next. Mine, like Kay's, goes back to place. And when I saw the call for UpSpring, I came back to place. I'm currently in Cedar City, Utah, so I'm out in the desert. This piece is a few years old now, so it's when I started grad school up in Marquette, Michigan, up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And so I grew up in Virginia, so I'm taking you all kinds of places, but all that to say I've lived in a few different places in a few different climates now, and I've found an upspring in clinging to the landscape. Kay said something about how, you know, the foundation was being laid, kind of going into those individual needs as against the whole. And I guess that really reminded me a lot of writing this piece and those feelings I was feeling moving up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So I'm going to go ahead and read my piece. It's called 40 Miles into the Seney Stretch. 40 miles into the Seney Stretch. I threw it in the back of a 57 dump truck. I watched ripples from the west and bled north, made love less. To be the little bones of peonies, you have to gather feathers. I listened to the hardness of water to stop the bleeding. And when I saw my heart long enough, I thought, burn everything. There wasn't enough room, so I did. Burnt war, burnt sun, burned apathy, an airplane. Saw my body blistered, said, this doesn't feel right. I did it anyway. Thank you.
I'm up next. My name is Raychelle Heath, and the poem I'm going to share is one that I wrote in one of my favorite workshops from community building artworks. So I'll shout out my wonderful teacher, Seema Reza. It's entitled Before the War. And when I thought about UpSpring, I went into a place of contemplation of human nature and the lies that we tell ourselves. So, before the war. Before the war, we were an imagined village, a bygone language, still bearers of freedom. Were we savannah people before, grazing green grasses, shifting with the winds? Were we Sahara people before, desert dark and masters of sand navigation? Were we Delta people before, toes water dipped and shining hands bountiful? Were we before the war? Before the war lingers at the edges of my tongue, tapping the backs of my teeth. Before the war wants out, wants to lull us into thinking sleepy, dreamy. Were we ever before the war? Before? And what of after? When we kiss soil and still seek favor to lay claim on something we can never own, instead of just letting it be. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I had already written my piece when I saw the call for submissions, and I had a feeling that it would fit in. Luckily, I was right. I grew up in a rural part of Northern California, and it's about the field behind the house where I grew up. And this part is about a game that I played with some of the boys who were neighbors. I forget who proposes the game. I'm 10 or 11 now, and it is late summer. The bleached grass is as tall as I am. We are crawling around on the hard clay on our hands and knees, invisible to each other, trying to find each other while trying not to be found. If we discover someone, we are supposed to tackle them and shout to the others. But if someone catches me, Jack says, they have to grab my boobs, which are just beginning to develop. I'm not sure why I play along, probably because I don't want to feel left out. But the thought of one of them tackling me, clumsy fingers squashing my chest, makes me shudder. It feels unfair that my body should be different, should somehow provoke different rules, should be a singular prize. I don't have the words yet to explain to myself why it fills me with dread. My changing body has already made me a target. Girls at school snap my bra, and another boy once groped me while we were swimming together in the Russian River. I was streaming through the green water, my body at home among the algae and small fish, when he swam up beside me, paced me for a few strokes, and clapped his hands onto my breast like someone snuffing out a pair of candles. I froze, heart pounding, and darted away to the shore. I never told anyone about it, and no one ever warned me that this might happen, that one day my body might become like the produce section at the market, where everyone can sample you, grab and squeeze you, test you for ripeness. Dirt grinds into my jeans as I crawl through the tall grass, and my palms and knees are sore from the dry ground. I move as quietly as I can, heat and dust tickling the back of my nose and throat. It's easy to keep away from the boys. Their noisy movements give away their locations and they can't keep from laughing. Mostly, I'm not trying to catch anyone. I'm focused on not getting caught. Eventually, I get tired of hide and seek and I crawl my way out. Sitting on the edge of the field, I watch the golden stalks bend in response to the boys' movements. The twisting paths they flatten into the landscape. It now resembles a maze with no entry point and no finish line, a spaghetti tangle of pathways. One by one, they emerge at different edges of the field, tired and sweaty, dirty and still laughing. Nobody has won unless you count me because I escaped. Thank you.
There, I had to find the unmute button. Can everyone hear me? I have my wireless headset on, so it's a little flaky sometimes. I'm Liane. Thank you for hosting this event tonight, and thank you for giving my words a home. I appreciate that, sharing a space with so many talented writers. My piece is, I think, a lot about dying, but as I think about that, I ponder impermanence and how we change and transform. And then when our current self leaves this space that we're in, we become something else. And I especially think of it, as I myself grow older, and I have a mom who just turned 98, and I just kind of like take it day to day with her. Anyhow, the title of my piece, and it's short, it's In Which I Die, Become Bird Tree. If I say I hear the thirst of trees, I mean I hear the rush and rise of my own blood in the swell of 1,000 buds. If I hear the leaves rustle and unfurl, I mean I hear myself unfold, become a flapping bird, tree, nightbird. I know a word the way a word knows water, the way water finds its shape, becomes what it wants. I open the window and unwinter, listen for things I can hear in the dark, like the ringing in my ears, like the moon is a bell, like it's time to come home, like a bird in a tree. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. My name is Jericho Hockett, and Liane, I am delighted to be following your poem about death because my poem is very much about life and transformation, which obviously hand in hand there, right? This poem that I wrote entitled Dig, I wrote based in part on the Sun Tarot. Right. So this is from Lindsay Silverman's Intuitive Night Goddess deck, which I absolutely love for both its art and its uplifting interpretations. And then it also references the myth of Medusa as retold by Jess Zimmerman in her Women and Other Monsters book, which I highly recommend. But most importantly, most centrally to this poem is that I wrote it in dedication to a colleague of mine who was anthropological archaeologist Laura Murphy, who submitted an amazing application for promotion and tenure. And I was lucky to be on the committee that did a review of her materials, and just seeing all of the work that she was doing, to which was central the uplifting and the promotion of women and other underrepresented groups in STEM fields, absolutely blew me away. So this poem is for Laura. Dig. Your head radiates with knowledge and prairie, hog-nosed snakes whose upturned scales dig in to Kansas sand to find what is needed to exist. Eyes looking past and future seeing, light shedding skin to show what hides within our soils. Your sight turns us into fossil stone, and we thank you because you go in, tending to ask so you can unearth ability, a whole volume to be birthed, and once created, we will grow. Dig, you encourage us as a way to teach, us to dig as a way to know. Your power is layered in with sediment and silt just as you dig. You understand through hand to earth how bodies alter terrain, how environments shape strategies we each use to survive. Dig, you ask us, even if you stumble on rock formations underfoot, crumbling as this dirt holds our evidence and vision, seeds you are digging for. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jaime, and I'd love to know how many of you have so far had some type of surgery in your life. Oh, yeah, right. So this poem, this is something that you'll recognize if that has been you. Like Liane, I was thinking about death and life and trees all at the same time, because like, what else do you do when you're made out of these same atoms that we are, except think about death and life and trees? So I'm going to read you this poem from the journal called We're of an Age Now. We're of an age now when my friends and I send each other pictures of our surgical scars. This one looks like a bite, I type, and whoosh, off goes the lumpectomy site. Clematis, scar, raised, and all that fat, round ripeness scooped out. My breast is depressed. We are utterly without eroticism. We are less romantic than bathroom designers. My friends eye the side of my breast. Yep, right there, they say, like prospectors jabbing at an X-marked mine. Excise, noun, a tax levied on certain goods or the licenses for pleasures. What pleasures this body has bought me, I admit. It was about time I paid what was due. T sends me a picture of a lump cut from her arm. It rests in a small, clear cup. What a hue. It looks like a piece of peach, she writes. It's true. What a beautiful fruit is the misbehaving body of my friend, my fleshly friend. I would swallow her. I would be the cup. I would be her ashtray as she laughs and taps. My body, the bodies of my friends. Were we growing on trees? Would we pluck each other? Will we have grown all along? Will we drop to the ground with our compatriots, wasps buzzing nearby? T sends me the sunset of her bruising. We watch it glow together. We nod and clink glasses. We watch ourselves fall, become pits, become trees. Thank you.
I'm Elyse Wells. This is my first time being published in a journal, so I'm super, super honored to be here and grateful that my piece was accepted. I actually moved to Greece. I'm Greek American, so I've lived in both places before, but I moved to Greece full time for the first time last year so that I could write full time. And I finished 2 books, so I'm pursuing publication and like so many poems. But this poem was actually the first one I wrote when I got there. And it's called Bougainvillea Bright. Bougainvillea bright, peppering the mountain's edge, crowning a stucco home. Leaves float through the park, deposited by the sylphs in your hair as you walk under balconies. Opaque leaves, vibrant in the summer sun, deep, mauve in moonlight. She moves me to remember, stand out joyfully. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Thank you all. I'm really honored to be here. I was going to say a little bit about what my UpSpring was, but I think that my poem speaks about it better than anything I was writing down. So I'll just read my poem. Growing a mother. Tender words shook my bones loose, rattled like seeds in a coffee tin. Milk, bundle, baby, mother. I was undeserving to grow a baby from soiled skin. This body I vilified. My hands dug into dirt, burying myself in a field of shortcomings, real or groundless, shaking where I was green. My son dawned early, vulnerable but hardy. Now he is bamboo, sturdier than I. He is honeysuckle vine, sweet in his spring. My shoulders bloom vibrant colors. I grow a mother and child, embracing duality. Our roots weave joy with devotion. My hands tending his body, healing mine. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Joyce, and I'm going to read a section of an essay, the essay that was published that's titled Waking Up 8 Years Later, which is part of the final chapter of my memoir, The Out-of-Body Girl. So all you need to know is in the scene that I'm reading, I've split up with my abuser, Kevin. He is driving in the car in front of me with our dog headed back east. And I have decided to stay in Santa Fe. And so anyways, I followed them down the highway. When I finally was ready to say goodbye, I flicked my lights, turned off the exit, and now I'm driving back to Santa Fe. I felt like I was driving back to Santa Fe as if for the first time. But the first time I was wide-eyed, filled with light and hope. I was in a world that resembled Mars with all its tumbleweeds, mesas, and wide horizon. Now I was heading back in the dark alone. No lover, no dog, but I felt the stiff steering wheel in my hands, felt my right foot on the gas pedal. I felt surprisingly calm. I wasn't wailing as I'd imagined I would be. A few miles north of Klein's Corners, I pulled over to the side of the highway. I stood by my car, arms up, lit by the spotlight of the half moon. Stars dotted the sky. I found the Big Dipper and the North Star. In another month, I knew I would see the comforting reflection of Orion once again. I knelt down on hands and knees and lifted 2 handfuls of sandy dirt to my face. I sniffed deeply of the sage fragrant earth, then let the granules sift through my fingers. I wondered how the world would look the next morning, wondered who I would become in the approaching weeks and months. I pulled myself through the sinister hands of Uncle Bob the molester, through the haunting memories of rape in Los Angeles, through the fragmented years of abuse with Kevin, split between terror and adventure. I'd had to let my crystal go, realizing for the first time that my own life was worth saving. Though it had been impossible as a child for me to make sense of my life, I knew now I could trust myself. I knew I could make myself stand alone if need be. The next few weeks, all I could eat were spoonfuls of peanut butter and a couple of bites of potato salad on the days I waitressed at Tejano Barbecue Restaurant. My favorite skirt refused to hold my hips, falling to the floor when I tried it on. My jeans grew 2 to 3 sizes too big. I took myself on walks up Santa Fe Mountain and through paths into Suke every day, but rarely did I notice the scrub jays, the yellow lilies, the lament of wind through Ponderosa pine. I literally broke my car tape deck by replaying Tom Petty. Over and over, I sang, learning to fly, but I ain't got wings. Coming down is the hardest thing. And then one day, out of nowhere, I made oatmeal. I zipped into an old pair of white jeans that hugged tight to my bones. I looked back at the mountain I had climbed and realized I'd been in my body that whole time. Every day, all day. I hadn't hovered among the cottonwood branches, hadn't floated through and above the ceiling, hadn't watched my own life from a bird's perch. I'd lived it with all its aches and pains. I was soul weary, yes, but I wasn't afraid. I could survive loneliness. I could survive heartbreak. I could contend with any loss this world might summon. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. My name is Kory Wells, and my middle name is Jill. So this poem that I'm going to share with you is very autobiographical. I really did change my name from Jill to Kory at the age of 8, as you'll hear in this poem. And I'm very fascinated by the power of names. Whatever happened to Jill? She was 8 and packing her name into a pencil box alongside blunt scissors and pink erasers, packing away the girl from the nursery rhyme her classmates sing-songed until she hated Mother Goose. It didn't matter if Jack was her brother or boyfriend. She hated how she was always falling, caught in endless loop of pail and hill. When the teacher at the new school called her by her first name, its 2 syllables were a fresh box of crayons, bold with possibility. But she was not someone new. She was still 4 Eyes, shamefaced at Poison Ball and Red Rover, always last picked for any team. She hated Jim, the gym teacher, his smooth tucked somersaults and polos, the constant shrill at his lips. Then one day, a boy running laps ran into her, a force bigger than push plus shove plus all the breath that left her body. Her vision dwindled to a tiny button of light in which, unlikely as Santa Claus, the gym teacher appeared, catching her as she wobbled and blued, laying her limp body on a mat, saying her new name over and over until it was true as water, until she climbed toward the sound. Thank y'all.
Okay, well, I guess I'm last. I had a difficult time trying to decide which of the 2 poems I wanted to read, but I think I'm going to read a poem called As It Was in the Beginning. And this is a poem I actually wrote, I want to say 35 years ago. And just kind of set it aside. It speaks to my early childhood with my grandparents who raised me when my mother became very ill with endometrial cancer in her 20s. And so my grandparents, her parents kind of took over for her. I am not a particularly religious person. They did drag me to church, so you will hear echoes of that here. I'm more of the Emily Dickinson, some keep the Sabbath going to church, I keep it staying at home person. Anyway, so here is As It Was in the Beginning, and you can't see it, but it's written in 3-line stanzas that are set off. So maybe you can picture that as I read. As it was in the beginning. Those clear and yeasty mornings, they speak through silence, stick-thin Adam and gray-haired Eve. He sips, she needs, he needs, she tips and laughs my dreams today. I stutter down the stairs. The clock's gold disc arrests me, floating back and forth, ticking, tickling me an imp who'd hang suspended on its rim without her bread's allure. She shows how it mounds like flesh, dark rye and white, molasses brown. It's warm and shiny, yields to touch. When we keep it warm, it grows. Out back, she pinches pins on bleached sheets. He folds stiff lengths into a wicker basket. I fall face first in crisp spring sun, roll to green wisps, cool worm tunneled dirt. Then he sinks with me and says, this ground's good as gold or better. We can't eat coins, but should give thanks for squash. She smiles and wanders in to make a lemon layer cake that feeds our need for yellow, like forsythia streamers arched beside the kitchen door. Before his outstretched arms I swing, hung like a pendulum from an apple limb, then come to earth behind him, striding off to find the year's first innocence, dotting the meadow in clusters like good luck. His brown hands cradle flowers the way they hold me after nightmare gallops through my sleep. They curl into bunny shadows on the wall. What's up, Doc? She makes me eat carrots. They make you good looking. They open your eyes. Her hands are soft and shiny as her bread, their lines worn off. At dark, her fingers comb my shock of hair and fear, calming them to silk beneath a dome of stars. These spring nights, he walks me to the silver pond, reflecting sunset's bloody veins. He says that peepers sing and ring like sleigh bells, that spring always winters over. His voice glides me on polished parallel runners behind a horse's ebony tail and dappled rump. I'm a princess speaking my own story. I'll never kiss a frog because they give girls warts and probably on the lips. I'm sure I'll stay myself forever, forever his and hers, world without end. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. That was amazing. I have so many things that I want to say to all of you because that was fantastic. But let's just take a second to do a sort of virtual round of applause for all of our readers. So yay, everyone did such a great job. I loved everything. And I have some questions and comments, but I would really love for you all to you can raise your hand, use the raise hand feature if you want to. You can type a question or comment in the chat again if you want to. There's not that many of us, so you can probably unmute yourself and just say something if you want to.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'll just say that I really enjoyed what I just heard, and I'm very sorry that I didn't join at the beginning of the hour. I had trouble figuring out how to log on, but this was really beautiful, and thank you so much. I really enjoyed everything I heard, and I'm sure the rest of it was equally wonderful. So thanks.
Thank you for being here. All right, well, I'll start things off by asking a question. And I would like to, I'm just sort of going down my list. So Kay, I wanted to ask you a question. One thing, when I was reading your piece and also hearing you read it tonight, the play of language, right, in your piece, it's very poetic. And probably one of the reasons I was very drawn to it as a poet. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily know, who aren't writers, that nonfiction writing, right, can also have that play with language and be very poetic like that. So Are you also a poet, or is that how you just love to write your nonfiction?
So this is a different kind of a piece for me. I've done some other things that are similar now, but this is one of the first forays. And I think it's because I just spent a week in California with one of my dear friends who is a poet. And we had we had read a lot of poetry and talked a lot. And I'd been noodling on this piece the week that I was visiting with her. And so the more I played with it, the more sort of rhythmic it became. And then I belong to this group. I belong to a writers group that's all Canadians except for me. And it's true what they say about Canadians. They're so nice, right? And so I'm like always saying to them, you're being too nice to me. Tell me what I can do, what I can do. And they really helped me develop this piece. And they liked the fact that it felt a lot like prose poetry. So I'm glad you saw that kind of connection, because it was influenced very definitely by multiple poets along the way.
I love that. I myself have loved being in writing groups that have poets, fiction writers, nonfiction writers, because those different plays between genres and the questions you get from people who are writing in different genres, I think can be really, really fruitful. So I love that. Thank you. Yeah. Let's see. I just want to see if anyone else has typed anything in the questions that I don't want to miss.
The other thing I wanted to add is I really think it's interesting because so many of the poems that were read tonight were drawn from personal experiences. And I feel like when you're getting a personal experience on a piece of paper, even if it's virtually on your computer, that you think in phrases more than full sentences. Does anybody else have that experience when they first start to write something that's personal?
Mm-hmm. Joyce, did you want to speak to that, or I saw you nodding vigorously?
Yes.
Okay, I could. Yeah, like an image or a phrase, usually more than some full sentence or idea, if that makes sense. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Karen, you have a question for everyone.
Sure. Some really wonderful work. You know, I've been sitting here, just the thoughts are buzzing like bees in my head. But I have a question that I think speaks to a lot of the writing tonight, and that is the ways in which many of us took very serious subjects and balanced that seriousness with either glimpses or full-on shots of humor. And I think for me, that's a really effective kind of balancing act, but I always wrestle with how to achieve it. And so I'd love to hear other folks' thoughts on sort of changing the tone within a particular piece, even if it's a very, very serious piece, to try to prevent it from maybe slipping over into sentimentality or slipping over into sort of didacticism.
I'd love to speak to that. That is, that's my vibe, right? Whenever I give a reading, I like to start out by reminding people that poems can in fact be funny and you can laugh, because there's nothing worse than being in a poetry reading and you throw off like the joke line and people are like, it must have been hard. You know, that's not the thing, right? So one, I think it works best for that particular thing, works best for those of us who do think that way. If you don't, it's not going to work as well for you, because it's not going to be as true to your experience or as true to your particular kind of language. When I hear the word sentimentality, I also like to think of the word sentiment, which is true and really meaningful. And I think our moments of humor are a kind of double consciousness, right? There's that joke, tragedy is when I stub my toe, comedy is when you fall in a manhole. And it's when you step back a little bit that you can see with more perspective. And when we create double consciousness by putting ourselves on the page, we step back, we give ourselves the opportunity to see that humor. But that humor also creates a kind of chiaroscuro where we have in sharp relief those moments of sentiment that then remain quite true. And finally, when we're writing from experience, whether we're calling it lyric essay, creative nonfiction, poetry, whatever, as Carrie Fisher said, if my life weren't funny, it would just be true. And that's really unacceptable. And there's so much room there for us. So like whatever it is that's true in that dissonance, that forms a kind of chord, and that chord can be laughter.
So I was just going to offer, Elyse, God love you, Elyse. It's like, what is it now? 1:30 in the morning. You're still awake. I don't even know how you do that. I can barely make it past midnight. And that's if I'm into a really good book. But anyway, I was just going to say, Elyse, this was her first piece, which is so exciting. And I wrote all of this different stuff and got rejection after rejection after rejection. And then I tossed off this very funny essay called Targets, which was about the very early days of the pandemic and how afraid I felt of catching COVID. And the piece just exploded. I got nominated for Best in the Net and blah, blah. And it was like this piece I hardly even worked on, but it was funny. And I think that that's a key in everything I write now, whether it's serious or not, there's always a little bit of funny in it. I think it's important. It's how it makes you relatable, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm not actually great at writing. I haven't nailed that yet. I'm a sad, melancholy poet still, but I need to maybe take some advice from you all and try to see what I can do with that.
I mean, I thought Jaime's piece was great. I mean, because it was
Absolutely
so
fantastic.
fun, because and the image about, she's got a lump in her arm and now it's in a jar and it looks like a peach, like something we picked off that, it's like, yeah, she, and I mean, who knows what her prognosis was, and it probably wasn't good, but here we are laughing about her lump. And I think there's something really healing in that.
Mm-hmm. Veronica.
I just want to say that all the poems were very beautiful. I was kind of on the verge of tears during some of them, and they were great. My question is a little bit more on the selfish side, because I am very early on in like my writing journey. And because so many of these poems were pulled from deeply personal and sometimes very difficult experiences, what, if any of you can speak on what the process is like, submitting a poem like that for publication and the fears associated with it, and how you kind of overcome, that kind of bearing your soul to the world kind of feeling. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind answering that. I think the piece I submitted tonight was actually probably one of the few that I didn't write about my own personal life, but I'm kind of in the middle of writing a manuscript about my mother getting very ill. And I think we reveal a lot in our writing. And what I always come back to is the purpose. What do I want to share when I'm sharing this work? And so the vulnerability serves the purpose. I'm telling this story because there's someone out there that I know is probably going through the same thing, and I want them to feel seen. And so if I can myself become visible in that space of vulnerability, then I can open it up for someone else to feel like they're not alone in what they're going through. And I think that's a really big motivator for me.
Thank you.
Anyone else have thoughts on that for Veronica?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that as well. I recently came back into writing, probably within the last 2 years, after a long pause. Prior to that, I was in an online writing group and was writing a lot of poetry. But when I think back about what I was writing back then, it wasn't really very good. But I recently completed a degree in creative writing. It's my 4th degree. And I just loved one of the teachers I had for one of my classes, and it was about contemporary writers and publication. And she just kept driving home the fact, submit and submit and submit, and you're going to get a lot of rejections. In fact, the poem that I read tonight was rejected about 20 times by other journals. But, you know, wherever you submit and whatever you submit, if just don't give up and submit it somewhere else, just keep doing it. And through the encouragement of other people, I opened up a Submittable account and just started going online. I started following people on Twitter, and I just kind of keep connecting with people little by little. And after probably about a year and a half of submitting individual poems, I finally put together a small collection, a chapbook manuscript, and submitted that for the very first time. So that'll probably get rejected, but who knows? And if that gets rejected wherever I submitted it, I'll just try it again somewhere else and just keep going and keep going. And another thing I'd like to say is that some of the things I write, I'll submit something, I'll write something, and people have different editing styles, and there's certain things I mull over. Sometimes I'll just write something like, I'll just send it out right away, and without really going over it a lot. And then I'll get rejected. Then I'll work on it a little. I'll submit it somewhere else. But it's just a process. Just keep at it and don't give up. And when you get rejected, say, so what? Next.
Thank you, Raychelle and Liane, for those responses. Karen, looks like you have a question again for everyone.
No, I was going to add, like Liane, I really just started submitting about a year ago. I've been writing for 40 years, but I've been writing poetry as well as other kinds of writing. But most of my writing has been academic writing. And you really get used to rejections if you do academic writing. But I always remember, and I can't remember who told me this, but the hockey player Wayne Gretzky used to say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I think that's really great advice. You just have to keep putting it out there. I tell my grad students, if you send something out, you get it back. You read it, you wait a day or two, you absorb the criticism, you incorporate the criticism, and you send it out again immediately. The second piece of advice that I really wanted to give is to try to find or join or create a writing group. Because I think there is absolutely no substitute for me. I've been in a writing group for that many years, and there's been no substitute for me for having that community of voices to be really helpful and to give me honest feedback.
Thank you. And now with Zoom, it's even easier to find a writing group, I think, because you can write with people from across the world if you want to.
I wanted to add to what was just said about joining a writing group. And I mean, sometimes I'm jealous because I see other people who are in MFA programs, and I would love to go for an MFA. If I win the mega bucks, it's like I'd just go to school forever. So I could just be in a, perpetual writing group all the time. But I would like to say, and this is a little plug for Yellow Arrow, I came into submitting because I was looking for online workshops, and I saw, maybe on Twitter, and I actually took one of the Yellow Arrow workshops with Tresha Hefner. And I participate in other writing communities like the Loft and Hudson Valley Writers. And, I just keep an eye on workshops. And I just find that so inspiring, that especially when I kind of hit like that dry spell that nothing just seems to be coming out, I, go into a workshop and get together with people. And yeah, it just happens. You really need that community for your writing to bloom. So.
So a couple of things in the chat. Karen asked if there's any way to connect with each other. Yeah, I think that's fine with me if it's fine with all of you, if you want to share your email addresses with one another in the chat.
Actually, let me just suggest we not do that, since we're going to share this recording publicly. So we can find another way to share emails, or set up a Google Sheet where folks can add them or something.
Yes. And also, I mean, I'm okay continuing to be sort of go-between. You all have my email because I've emailed all of you. So I'm happy to say, if you email me and say, hey, I wanted to connect with this person, I'm happy emailing them and saying, do you want to connect with this person? I'll be a little literary online dating sort of, if you guys want. So I'm totally fine with that. And I think probably a lot of us are pretty easy to find on social media, I would guess too. So yes, how wonderful though. Thank you for that suggestion. It would be great to keep in touch with people. So we're right at 8 o'clock now. Does anyone have any last thoughts or questions they would like to contribute?
Just thank you, Rebecca, for all your work, and thank you, Annie, for organizing. And I'm just so impressed with the roster of folks that put together Yellow Arrow. It's just a powerful group of gals, and I was just totally thrilled to be included in UpSpring.
Well, the success of a journal is because of its contributors too. So thank you, all of you, for making Yellow Arrow, for me specifically, this issue, what it is. Catrice.
Thank you very much. I came in a little tardy, so my apologies. Sometimes I have a long learning curve on how to do things. It took me a minute to get in. I apologize. I came in while Raychelle was reading, and then I heard everyone else after Raychelle. So I just wanted to say that your work is really beautiful. It was very layered and very well crafted, and concise. I wanted to also say that it was very inspiring at a time where lots of people need to hear other stories. The more I've been on Zoom, the more people I've met who are going through things, and even me personally. So it's actually very empowering to hear someone else's story, to know that they've gotten to a place where they can talk about their life. And so I wanted to ask, to pose the question to you. I'm a writer, and I write a number of things, but I've never written creative nonfiction that I know of, which is intriguing. And I wanted to know, at what place of healing or in your process were you able to select your pieces? Did you select your pieces after you have healed and it's something you can reach back for safely? Or is it something you were going through and were able to write in that space? Where were your head spaces when you selected your pieces?
I'm actually going to chime in on that one. I don't think that healing is ever done to start with, but writing is definitely part of the process of healing. And when I'm writing, something might be really fresh, or it might be 20, 30, 40 years in the background. But I think you just kind of know when you feel ready to try to write about something. And then if you write it and you're not ready, you'll know.
Yeah, if I can speak to that for a minute too. I have been writing about some health issues. And so Jaime is making me feel so inadequate because she puts so much humor into those things. And actually, Jaime, I do that a lot in my poems as well. But these particular poems did not feel like there was any humor in them. There was a lot of grief. And I think writing them, as Beth said, is so important in the process. And the poems are really fairly ready to go. But it turns out, even trying to share them with a few strangers, I'm not ready, and so I just have to sit and hold those. And, the poet in me feels some frustration at not being able to go ahead and put those into the world. But the person me, I just realized I'm not ready. So, and it may be years, because I'm writing about stuff that took place years ago as well.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for all of your responses. What a great discussion. Anyone else have any final thoughts or questions they would like to add? All right, well, this seems like a great point to wrap up. So just once again, thank you to everyone for being here and for being a part of Yellow Arrow Journal. I'm thrilled to be a part of it temporarily, and I'm so glad that you all are here as well. Thank you for taking the time to read your work and also answering questions and having this conversation. And I hope that I will see you all again somewhere on the interwebs in the future.
Thank you, everybody. This was so inspiring. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Great to meet you all.
Yes, you too.